Living in Montana means something different to everybody, but if you're like me, Montana has always been synonymous with hunting. Still kind of the Wild West, Montana can seem lawless to some, especially depending on where you're moving from. But when it comes to hunting regulations, there are a lot of things that you need to know and nuances that you need to have in the back of your head as you're preparing for your hunt. Here are 10 things to know about hunting in Montana. Before you even start thinking about where you're going to go, what rifle you're going to be shooting, who you're going with, what gear you need, you first need to make sure you have the right licenses and tags to make sure you're legal and above board for your hunt. Anyone born after January 1st, 1985 is required to complete hunter safety. You can start taking hunter safety as early as 10 years old, but the certification isn't actually required until you hit 12. Hunter safety consists of two different courses. One, a classroom, in-person or online course, just to make sure you understand the general rules and safety requirements for hunting. This typically takes about 12 to 20 hours depending on how efficiently you work and whether you do it online or in person. I personally took mine online, had a lot of understanding about the safety. I already had a background going with my family hunting, so understood a lot of the safety guidelines and whatnot. It was pretty easy and quick to complete. And then the second portion is a separate field day. You go out with an instructor. I think they give you fake guns. You practice crossing fences, communicating with your partners, making sure that once you're out in the field, you actually follow the rules, since everybody knows, there's a big difference between taking an online course and actually being safe in the field. Some types of specialized hunting, like bow hunting, require additional courses. I got my bow hunting stamp. I think it took 4 hours just to make sure you understand the additional nuances that come with that type of weapon. Additionally, some species also have different requirements in continuing education that you have to take. For instance, when hunting black bears, you have to take an identification course to make sure that you can correctly identify the difference between black bears and grizzly bears, male bears and female bears, because it can be, once you're out in the field and that excitement hits you, it can be a little bit hard to tell the difference unless you spend quite a bit of time watching these animals. After you handle the education portion, you can then start paying for licensure through the Fish Wildlife Park's website. These licenses are usually required annually. I think they start over in March, and this portion, the actual licensing, doesn't have a huge difference in cost for residents and non-residents. Before you get a hunting license, both residents and non-residents are required to have a conservation license. This is usually in the $10 range. You'll also be required to have an aquatic invasive species prevention pass to make sure you know the rules about, not having invasive species like some of these mussels transferred from one water body to another, usually over the continental divide, just to make sure that we're keeping our environment safe. Then you can start paying for things like your base hunting license. I usually get a bundle. It's usually cheaper, some economy of scales if you buy multiple things at once. So there are different bundles on the Fish Wildlife Park's site where you can get different types of licensing. I usually just buy everything at once just to make sure that I'm covered. And after you have all the correct licensure, then you can start paying for tags themselves. So the tags on top of the licensing is what allows you to go after a specific species of animal. And this is where things can get expensive, especially for non-residents. Tags can run anywhere from $20 over the counter for, a discounted college student, all the way up to thousands of dollars for a guided hunt, or, you know, even just, I think a non-resident deer elk bundle is over $1,200, and that's a drawing. You're not even guaranteed to get the tag itself. To put in for one of these lottery drawings, you typically have to apply, it's usually a month in spring, usually the month of March 1st to April 1st. You buy your licensing, pay for the drawing tag, and then wait to hear if you were one of the lucky ones chosen to get your tag. The hunting seasons themselves also vary. For an example, for deer and elk, since that's usually kind of the first species that people get into hunting, at least in my experience, there's a mid-fall archery season, usually running from mid-September to middle or end of October. It does vary a bit by year. Then there'll be, you know, a couple of weeks of a youth-only hunt where, you know, kids can go out, obviously with a supervisor adult, and get an opportunity to shoot something when these animals aren't quite spooked yet. And then the rifle season typically runs from mid to late October to late November. This year it actually ran until December 1st, which was interesting to me. I'm used to Thanksgiving typically being the last day of rifle season for deer or elk. There are also what's called shoulder seasons, which typically run from late summer to early spring, late winter. I think this last year, shoulder seasons ran from middle of August to middle of February, that have additional requirements for your hunt. You know, in my experience, these shoulder seasons truly are just to control the population in very specific areas. Like I said, typically more stringent rules. Usually this is when you see guys that didn't get their big bull for the year shoot a cow elk on a friend's property or a block management area that tends to have quite a larger population than your general public land. For those of you specialists, there's also a muzzleloader season. It's actually never something I've participated in, although I'd love to, because this is a little bit trickier as well. It has its own dedicated season, usually a very short period, you know, a week or two in middle of December, in which you can hunt with a muzzle-loaded rifle only. As always, be sure to check the hunting regulations, you know, 4 or 5 times at least, to make sure you're following the rules and dates for the specific area that you're looking to hunt. There also are sometimes backcountry areas that have specified dates. For instance, I go hunting with a friend. We'll go bow hunting on one side of a trail during the archery season, you know, in mid to late fall. And the other side of this trail is all backcountry. So his parents, who like to take it a little bit easier, don't want to climb to the top of a peak to do their hunting. They'll hunt with rifle on one side legally, while we'll be hunting with bows during archery season on the other side. Another thing that many people want to know about hunting is where to hunt, obviously, right? Hunting access can get pretty tricky, especially as Montana's population continues to grow and some of these urban areas expand out a bit. In general, you know, there are still millions of acres of public land available for recreating in general and hunting. The 3 main types are national forest, state land, and BLM, or Bureau of Land Management land. Those are all open to the public, but just because they're public land doesn't mean you can necessarily hunt on them. There is a research period that goes into each of these hunts. I typically use an app, like Onyx Maps is one of my favorite. Look at the hunting district that I'm in, look at the area, click through and then just really make sure using a combination of that GPS app and the Montana regulations through Fish Wildlife Parks to make sure you're good to hunt, not only in general, but the specific species and sex that you're looking to bag. Also make sure that as you're accessing these public lands, you're not going through anybody's private land to do it. This is also a point of contention. I like to think that most public lands should be able to be accessed in one way or another, but there are some public lands that are kind of sealed off to the public just based on lack of access. There also are what's called checkerboarded public lands, where you'll see one parcel of public land adjacent to two parcels of private land, but then maybe another public over here with just a corner touching. Big point of contention, corner crossing is still frowned upon, illegal as of right now. I know Wyoming just had a big case about it, but as of now, just play it safe. Be a steward, really respect these landowners to make sure the future of hunting stays safe and accessible for all of us. As we discussed before, Montana's wide landscape provides a plethora of opportunities throughout the year to hunt various species. I'm not going to list every species and season date here. It'd be 12 minutes of me just listing off dates, but in general, over the course of the year, there's always something that could be hunted at a specific time. When it comes to specific hunting areas, the whole state is broken up into regions, and then those regions are further broken into hunting districts. As you're preparing and doing research for your hunt, it's imperative that you realize what hunting district you're going to be in. And if you're going to be traveling a long distance, make sure you know the regulations, not only for the main hunting districts, but any adjacent ones as well. There's nothing worse than seeing that big shooter bull right on the edge of one hunting district, chasing it to the other side and not knowing if it's legal to shoot it across that line. Be prepared, have your maps downloaded. When it comes to gear, any hunter knows that you could easily spend thousands of dollars preparing for a hunt. I'm not a gear snob. If I'm doing an overnight outdoor deep snow excursion, sure, each little item you can bring to make yourself more comfortable will obviously improve your experience. But keep in mind, you also want to stay light, be able to move if you're chasing after a big game animal. And our ancestors did this, with none of this technology or high-end gear that we have. So just remember to stay warm, stay dry, and have fun with it. Speaking of staying warm and dry, before you go out, make sure you check multiple day forecasts for the area you're going to be hunting. I really like using NOAA. I have a link. You can actually pinpoint a very specific area on a map using that site to make sure that you're not going to go out there, prepare camp, and immediately hit a blizzard. Montana's weather, as anybody who lives here more than 6 months knows, can change in an instant. They say if you don't like the weather in Montana, wait 5 minutes, and I've had it ring true on my hunts. I've gone out at the end of bow season in the fall, had it been 70 degrees out, not wearing a coat, and the next day, like the flip of a switch, we get a foot of snow on some of these high elevation peaks. So make sure you're prepared, check the weather, bring good boots, always bring an extra layer, and the biggest ones, warm wool socks. Always recommend wool. They stay warm when they get wet, and a nice head covering, hat, etc. When it comes to your weapon of choice, there are many different options. Everybody has an opinion, but the main thing to make sure is whether you're using a rifle, bow, muzzle loader, anything, that you can efficiently and effectively take down that animal. You want to make sure that your caliber size is large enough for the species that you're hunting. You know, a rifle round that could easily take down a white-tailed deer may not be powerful enough to take down that big bull elk. Do your research ahead of time. Make sure you sight in your rifle, your bow, shoot it, practice shooting from different positions. You know, in the backcountry, you're not always set up to be able to take that perfect prone 100-yard shot. So definitely take shots of varying distances, varying weather patterns, and various physical positions of your body to make sure that you're as prepared as possible. There's nothing worse than wounding an animal. You know, occasionally it will happen, but it's better to not have shot at all than to have taken a bad shot at an animal. If you're lucky enough to have a friend, family member, or just somebody that invited you onto their private land in order to do a hunt, make sure you thank them. Honestly, it's getting rarer and rarer that there are these large parcels available for hunting. I've always been a public land hunter myself. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with private land hunting. However, just make sure you really cherish, respect, and appreciate that person that's letting you hunt on their land. You know, if you do shoot something, maybe give them some meat, write them a thank you card. Just make sure you're super appreciative, because it's a very special thing to have somebody invite you to their home, their recreational property, and take you out to show you, you know, a native herd of animals. When it comes to the times to hunt in order to be most successful, this is another one of those things that everybody has an opinion on. You know, animals at the end of the day are animals to a degree. They are unpredictable. You can get lucky, you can get unlucky, but there are some rules of thumb. For instance, I really like bow hunting due to the fact that that is when elk are in rut, which means it's their mating season. They tend to be a little bit more cognizant of, you know, calls. It's easier to call them in. Whereas the deer mating season tends to be later in the year. So I really like to shoot personally for elk during bow season, deer during rifle season. But, you know, everybody has their different preferences. A lot of people think that, you know, either sunrise or sunset hunting tends to be the best time of day. I do agree with that to a degree. I've had friends and personally shot animals, you know, at noon while everybody's sitting around eating lunch. You can occasionally walk out of your tent in the morning and see one and get lucky. Kind of just a crapshoot sometimes. Whether you're looking for a big trophy animal or just some meat for your freezer, a lot of these sites and online references have statistics that you can look at. You can see how many animals of a certain category were shot in each area and do your research accordingly. It can vary hugely just over the course of a mile, whether you're running into, you know, 100 cows, bunch of big bulls, deer, elk, moose. They cover a wide distance, but do also have these areas that they prefer to kind of hang around and stick based on food prevalence, shelter, etc. Overall, hunting in Montana can be one of the most rewarding experiences in life, in my personal opinion. You know, it's not easy. You go out there, you embrace the suck, put in time with your friends, and really get to appreciate these areas for what it is. Getting off the beaten trail and really discovering some of these backcountry areas is an outstanding experience. Hunters occasionally come under fire because of some perceived ethical issue. It truly is my opinion that without hunters, we wouldn't have nearly the amount of public land that we do today. There are some bad eggs, obviously, but for the most part, I think the hunting community has been exceptional stewards of our public lands, our environment, our green spaces, and the animals themselves. Our state in particular does a great job looking at the statistics, putting in research, really figuring out which animals have enough of a population in order to continue to be hunted in specific areas, which do not. And in some cases, they'll even shut down a specific area mid-season if they see a lot of hunter success or that population start to decline, either from hunters or from natural predators. I hope you like the info, hope you like the video. Hit the like and subscribe. Reach out if you have any further questions about hunting. Obviously not willing to give away any of my honey holes, specific areas, but if you just have general questions, want to know, some good parts of the state where you can at least get away from people and kind of have an area to yourself, happy to provide some of that general information. And as always, happy trails.